Good evening, everybody. This is a ReCon coming to you from 200 feet under the ocean in a bunker, hiding from the political warfare that has plagued our country. I'm going to try to make it a shorter video today. The last few have been long, and I have just been feeling relaxing and talking to you about my opinions. So today, we're going to go ahead and talk about the pandemic of whiteness. Alright, everybody, but first grab your drink, sit back, and let's enjoy this intro. That intro's nice and relaxing, isn't it? Okay, so in 2020, during the BLM riots, Forbes put out this article. Normally, I'm a pretty big fan of Forbes, but this article is, well, let's just read it. By Dana Brownlee, maybe? It's titled, Dear White People, here are 5 uncomfortable truths Black colleagues need you to know. I believe they actually put 6 in here, so don't know why they named it that. Truth number 1 is racism doesn't just show up in its most extreme form. There is indeed a continuum of racist thoughts and behaviors, and you may be on it. She is, of course, talking about microaggressions, right? This would be you making a side comment about them asking where they're from, allegedly ignoring them, perhaps in a meeting or something like that. That's what she's talking about for racism. She even says the word racism has been so bastardized in our culture that we only recognize it in its most extreme forms. What I would argue to that is the word racism has so much power behind it. It'd be like calling someone a white supremacist. Of course it's a charged word. But anyway, they're talking about microaggressions here. We can get into that a little later. But let's just carry on. Truth number 2, even if you personally haven't offended anybody that you know of, you may indeed be part of the problem. You know what? I'm going to add something else to that. Even if you have personally offended someone, that doesn't mean you're part of the problem. Just because someone gets offended doesn't mean they're in the right. I mean, you can use that argument for almost anything. Just because you get offended that someone doesn't believe in climate change means you're part of the problem. Just because you get offended that I want lower taxes means you're part of the problem. Although I guess it doesn't even work that way, right? It'd be me getting offended that they don't want lower taxes, making them part of the problem. I mean, I don't really understand how that works. It seems like getting offended is a personal problem, not a social problem. Truth number 3. Is it just me, or does this truth number thing seem a little patronizing? It's not like they give statistics or anything to say it's a fact. I give it about as much credit as someone saying the meaning of life is to get as much money as you can or something like that. That's the truth. I mean, it doesn't have much weight, just someone saying the truth is without any evidence. But anyway, truth number 3, every black person on your team is not your friend. Okay, every white person on your team isn't your friend either. I don't see why that matters. Truth number 4, gender and race discrimination are not, quote, essentially the same. And then down below, they throw little stats for the wage gap between men and women, between black and whites. And white men, on average, make far more than black women. And, a lot of people have to debunk that whole thing. A lot of times it matters how long you've been somewhere, how many hours you worked, and frankly, what job you have. They also bring up different CEOs for Fortune 500 companies. There's only 37 female CEOs for Fortune 500 companies, 0 black female CEOs, stuff like that. In fact, if you want a good breakdown about that, I'll throw a link to a Thomas Sowell video where he breaks that type of stuff down really well. Truth number 5. Even though there may be 1 or 2 black faces in leadership, your organization may indeed have a rampant racial problem. And sure, why not? I'll let them have that one. I don't really want to argue there. I mean, that's just factually true, especially with like affirmative action and this social push to get more black faces on boards and whatnot. It's pretty obvious that even if you're a racist company, you might put up a few black faces either to hide it or just to seem like you're supporting these social issues. Anyway, he throws in a bonus truth, number 6. This is my favorite one. You can absolutely be part of the solution. Oh, thank God. See, I was reading this and I was kind of thinking, it kind of seems like no matter what I do, I'm going to be part of the problem because I'm not black. But here, she tells us how to be part of the solution. So let's go ahead and read that. The solution. As workplaces tackle racism with a renewed sense of urgency amidst the worldwide Black Lives Matter protests, it's imperative that they approach the problem of racism as they would any other serious business problem, methodically, intensely, and with a sense of urgency and conviction. The first step of problem solving is generally better understanding the problem, and in this case, that also means confronting uncomfortable truths. In the pivotal Black Lives Matter moment, corporate leaders and ultimately everyday workplaces have an opportunity to do something different instead of nibbling around the edges of pursuing the path of least resistance. We can push into territories as both uncomfortable and transformative to truly dismantle systemic racism and transform organizational cultures in a way that invites everyone to show up at work as their authentic selves. Did you understand how you could be part of the solution? I didn't. I'm sorry, let's go back to the steps she lays out. The first step of problem solving is generally better understanding the problem, and in this case, that also means confronting uncomfortable truths. The second step, no, wait, she didn't put a second step. Okay, I guess this is part of the listen and believe thing, huh? She also throws down to truly dismantle systemic racism and transform organizational cultures in a way that invites everyone to show up at work as their authentic selves. One, I don't really want everybody to show up at work as their authentic selves, but that's not even the worst part of this. The worst part of that statement is the fact that she says to truly dismantle systemic racism. Because of my current understanding of the leftist belief of systemic racism, is that it is deeply embedded in every single system we have, right? It's embedded in the Constitution. It's embedded in every business. It's embedded in the police. So in order to dismantle that, you would actually have to tear down the organization. So from what I'm understanding, now she doesn't give a second step, okay? But what I'm understanding is that the first step is listen and believe, and the second step is tear everything down. That doesn't sound like a movement that I want to support, personally. I'm not a fan of tearing everything down. I mean, we formed almost objectively the greatest society that's ever lived. It's ever been. The most accepting, the wealthiest, the easiest. But no, we should tear that all down to fight an invisible monstrosity that these people are telling us about. I can't get down with that. All right, let's move on to time.com, where they say black and brown people have been protesting for centuries. It's white people who are responsible for what happens next. How do you know you're white? This is a question that is first posed in this article. It reads, I'm talking to 100 law students. The room is racially diverse and full of people who have gotten into top law schools. They committed to making racial equity a cornerstone of their work. They tend to think about race in their daily lives. They've chosen to attend this evening lecture about the problematic ways race is baked into American laws and legal pedagogy, but not a single hand goes up to answer my question. And this matters. Here, how about this? Your skin is white. How about that? I can answer that question in 2 seconds. Your skin's white. That makes you white. Whatever. I often start these talks by asking several volunteers to tell me what race they are. I then ask them how they know. Invariably, students of color say things like, I know I'm black because the world tells me every single day. Or, I know I'm Latinx. Wow. I feel like we should start spelling black, but with K instead of CK. I know I'm blacks. I know I'm Latinx because my family is. It's my blood. It's my language. I'm getting the vibe. I don't know about you. I'm getting the vibe that they're about to say that race is socially constructed, as they did with gender, and we should be able to, through societal norms, construct our own race. Right, because if we're practicing societal norms from another race, and therefore with that race, and I can't think of a more racist idea. I don't know that for sure, that's just going to be my prediction, so let's continue. But when I ask white students how they know they're white, the answer is almost always the same: silence. White students often stop short, unable to identify and articulate the culture, political, economic, and historical clues that tell them they are part of whiteness, let alone what being part of whiteness truly means. I let the silence grow. It gets uncomfortable. Then I step in to suggest that this phenomenon, not the individual student, is a significant part of Americans' problem with race. It's a major part of how we arrive at moments like this one, where dozens of cities are convulsing with racial pain, state violence, and the shell-shocked gaze of many white Americans asking themselves how this can happen again. Although he does put it's not a mystery to black people of color. Remember Amy Cooper? She's a white woman who a few days ago called the police on a bird-watching black man in Central Park and repeatedly emphasized that he was African American to the dispatcher. She may feel like old news now, but her actions are deeply instructed for this new, more convulsive moment. I bet if I asked the same question, how does she know she's white, she'd respond with the same blank silence as many of my, he put, progressive or unusually aware students. How do I know? Her apology, which indicated that she doesn't truly understand what it means to be part of whiteness. Critically, she said, I would have never imagined that I would be involved in the type of incident that occurred. Now, if you guys remember this incident, it was a while ago. This lady did call the police on a black man and emphasize the fact that he was African American to the police, under the assumption that they would come and essentially kill him or beat him up or something like that, because she's been brainwashed to believe that any cop interaction with a black man results in violence. In my mind, that's more of a brainwash from the left than from the right, but I'll leave that up to you to decide. And that's just it. In this country, we have thousands of white people who consider themselves aware of pain racism can cause and who never imagine themselves inflicting it, but then do. You know what? I'm actually going to say that the people who consider themselves on the side of black people, or the people who consider themselves woke, are probably more likely to inflict these things because race is constantly at the top of their mind. If you're constantly thinking about something, you're more likely to have that intertwine into your actions. That's not shocking to me at all. There are countless white people who consider themselves progressive and quote good on racial issues, who scoff and are offended by actions like Miss Cooper, but who, to their surprise, are capable of similar actions. Any person of color who knows quote, good white people can tell you this is true. It's how we get, for example, progressive colleagues who nevertheless call us by the name of the other black woman we work with repeatedly, or comment on how pretty our hair looks when we wear it straight, saying it's usually just so poofy. On the more extreme end of the spectrum is also how we get cops, people who presumably have dedicated themselves to a life of service, literally suffocating black people like George Floyd as they beg for their lives. It is also how we get these moments repeatedly. Okay, so let's go back a little bit. She's pointing out a lot of quote-unquote microaggressions, right? Colleagues who call you by the name of another black woman, or I guess man. I want to say, I've worked quite a few places, 5 or 6. Every single one of them, people have confused my name for someone else, called me someone else. And it could be people I'm close to, and they're just having an off day. I don't get super offended by that. There was this Filipino lady who did that quite a bit to me. I loved her to death. She was great. She was an elderly, like maybe 60-year-old lady who did it quite a bit. I didn't get offended and snap at her. I didn't go home and think about the social implications of that for hours. I didn't write articles for the time because of that. Usually I laughed a little bit, corrected them, moved on with my life. And then they do it again, and I laugh at it again. It's not that big of a deal. And people who prefer straight hair, look, I prefer hair with that little braid that goes around the head, you know what I'm talking about? Goes back into a bigger braid. That's the hair I prefer. Someone wears it like that, I'll go, wow, I really like your hair. You know what they don't do? Get offended because their hair is usually straight and now it's in a braid. And so they did something to it. And I like the look of it better. They don't get offended by that. Anyway, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit, see if they give any conclusion. Phrased differently, it is white people, especially progressive white people, who are responsible for what happens now. Either they work to understand and change how white supremacy moves in and through our lives, hearts, minds, and spaces, or they decide they don't have time, they're too scared, they can't deal with it, or like Miss Cooper, they linger in the fallacy that they could never be involved in a racist incident. Either they accept that they have inherited this house of white supremacy, built by their forebears, and willed to them, and they are now responsible for paying the taxes on that inheritance, or the status quo continues. I hope they will become radicalized by this moment and begin to fight fiercely for racial justice. But more than that, I hope that they start at home, in their own minds and hearts. As I tell my students, a white person rushing to do racial justice work without first understanding the impacts, uses, and deceptions of their own whiteness, is like an untrained person rushing into the ER to help the nurses and doctors. Therein probably lies more harm than good. This has got to be my favorite part of the article right here. One thing though, don't ask me how to start. That's part of your work too. The answers are all around you if you're willing to look and listen. Yeah, that's just lazy right there. At least give a solution. Right, you had, 600 words, maybe? Multiple large paragraphs. I mean, if you're going to spend that much time critiquing somebody, then you should give them a solution. I mean, minimum, right? That's just, if I have a friend who's an alcoholic, and I yell at them just all the time for being an alcoholic, and I go, you need to stop being an alcoholic. Don't ask me where to start, though. That's your work. That's not helpful. Now the person just feels like shit. If I have someone who is extremely overweight, and just to give you a little bit of my background, I used to personally train people and I helped them lose weight quite a bit. I've lost a good amount of weight in my life as well. If there is someone who is extremely overweight, has diabetes, and it's affecting their life in a large way, and I say you need to lose weight. Not going to tell you how though. That's part of your work too. Like, come on. No, I'd say, hey, maybe try keto. Maybe try a modified keto. Maybe try, counting calories. Don't eat as much sugar. Don't eat as much fried chicken or McDonald's. Maybe cook at home a little more. Try to get the rest of your family and friends to join you or support you in this. Things like that. I would give actual solutions, not just yell at them for all the things that fat people have done wrong and then tell them, but I'm not going to tell you how to fix it. That's your work. No, I think it's more so that the only solution that you have is completely tearing down the society, right? Because that's the end goal. So if you actually revealed that hand, a lot less people would listen to you. And so instead of doing that, you just yell at people, make them worried that they'll get canceled, or, make them feel like they're walking on eggshells. And then you don't give them a solution because they're pretty much willing to do whatever you say. So you can work on your solution slowly, just have them mindlessly follow you because they think they're doing the right thing. This leads us to the article by The Root called Whiteness is a Pandemic. You can see the evolution of this thought and how they're getting more confident with just saying what they mean. This was posted a week or so ago, again on The Root. I don't have much to add here today that hasn't already been said. Whiteness is a public health crisis. It shortens life expectancies. It pollutes air. It constricts equilibrium. It devastates forests. It melts ice caps. It sparks and funds wars. It flattens dialects. It infects consciousness, and it kills people. White people and people who are not white, my mom included. There will be people who die in 2050 because of white supremacy-induced decisions from 1850. Very colorful word. This is a short article, so we might as well read the other 3 paragraphs. A line can and should be drawn from the activities of the white supremacists who walked into 3 Atlanta area massage parlors yesterday and allegedly killed 8 people, 6 of whom were of Asian descent. To the relentless anti-Asian rhetoric pollinating national discourse over the past year, the former president and the party of the former president can and should be blamed for this and the sudden increase of racist violence against Asian Americans. The line doesn't stop there, though. It extends back 400 years and has tentacles clawing everywhere. White supremacy exists here in America, which is everywhere. There's a line connecting this act of terror to the 11 people killed at the Tree of Life Synagogue in 2018, and the 9 people killed at the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church. Wow, that's a long name. In 2015, of course. But also to gentrify, to redlining, to racial profiling, to gerrymandering, to voter oppression, to mass incarceration, to the war on drugs, to the subprime mortgage crisis, to the vast disparities in both the virus deaths who receives the virus vaccinations, to how the men and women who stormed the Capitol just went home and had dinner with their families afterwards. While we were still processing and recovering from what we had witnessed, they were already back on their couches watching Criminal Minds. White supremacy is a virus that, like other viruses, will not die until there are no bodies left for it to infect, which means the only way to stop it is to locate it, isolate it, extract it, and kill it. I guess a vaccine would work too, but we've had 400 years to develop one, so I wouldn't hold my breath. I'm sorry, I'm going to take a second and read that again. White supremacy is a virus that, like other viruses, will not die until there are no bodies left for it to infect, which means the only way to stop it is to locate it, isolate it, extract it, and kill it. What? I'm sorry, what? Alright, so his evidence for this that he gives, so he does give some evidence, right? The 8 people killed at the massage parlors. Although that seems to be more of a sex worker thing, but we'll let him have it, why not? The 11 people killed at the Tree of Life Synagogue, and the 9 people killed at Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church. So since 2015, his evidence of this is like 28 people dying, and 3 incidents, plus the George Floyd incident, if you can count that. Now, he does add in some policies like redlining, racial profiling, voter oppression. I don't know if he means now or if he meant what occurred in like the 1920s. Because now, I mean, that's a hard case to make. War on drugs, incarceration, the subprime mortgage crisis. I don't know if you noticed, but pretty much all the issues he's bringing up here are caused by government. I'm just saying, like, I don't know what he's going for, but if it's policy, might I add that that's what caused those things. At least caused the vast majority of those. And I guess that means we need to stop, locate whiteness, isolate whiteness, extract whiteness, and kill whiteness. Right, that's what he's saying here, right? Because whiteness is the pandemic he's talking about. I know he says white supremacy down here, but the title is Whiteness is a Pandemic. Whatever. Let's move on. So he's talking about the massage parlor shooting in Atlanta that happened. Right, and so they came out and they brought up a bunch of incidences where Asian people have been discriminated against. I talked about some in my last video. And they brought up a surge in anti-Asian hate, in which a bunch of Trump supporters responded to that with, wait, but it's mainly like people of color doing this. How is this a white problem, a white supremacy problem, if they're not committing it? But don't worry, Eugene Gu has the answer for you. He tweeted out, and this is response to a horrific video. I don't even want to show you the video because of how bad it is. Where in New York, you've got the article right here, where in New York a man was charged with a hate crime where he threw down this Asian lady and curb stomped her multiple times. Again, I'm not showing the video. I'll put it down below, but it is disgusting. I also want to point out that they didn't say their race in the headline. I don't think they should, but when it's a white person doing it, they always do. Anyway, so in response to that, Eugene Gu said, Black on Asian crimes only occur because our society of white supremacy that strips African Americans of their economic opportunities while taking respect and dignity away from Asian Americans. Also, white people in power are experts at dividing and conquering to stay in power. This stems from a very long tradition of the Democratic Party to see black people as non-autonomous human beings that can't make decisions on their own. If anything bad happens to them, it can't be their fault because they're not autonomous. It has to be somebody else's fault. Now that's true in some cases, especially when there's policies put into place like Jim Crow. You'll see this mindset affect a lot of things. This is why we have to lower the SAT score requirements to allow black people into Ivy League colleges. This is why we lower standards for black people to get into a company. This is why the left needs you to continue seeing race, because without it, they lose this power of calling groups non-autonomous, and therefore we need to put in special policies to help them, to push them forward. It's all done in the name of equity. For those of you that don't know the difference between equity and equality, equality is everybody has the same opportunities. Equity is everybody has the same outcome. These are two completely different things. I remember I'd asked one of my friends, who said that she wanted equality. And I said, what kind of equality? Do you mean equality of opportunity or equality of outcome? And she said both. And I go, there's just no way that's going to happen. I used myself as an example at the time where I was working 2 jobs and going to college. So I was working 60 to 70 hours a week and taking 15 hours worth of classes. She was working 18 hours a week and taking 15 hours worth of classes. And I said, do you think we're going to end up in the same spot if we continue this way? And she said, well, not really. And I go, well, don't you have the opportunity to do what I'm doing? She said, yeah. And I said, so the only way to ensure that we end up in the same spot is either to force you to do as much as I'm doing, or to force me to not do as much. And that's really the answer. When you hear equity, it doesn't mean that people are equal. It means that groups are going to be discriminated against. It sounds like equality, so they can use it and get away with it, but that is not even close to what it means. We have a culture that's trying to manipulate and scare you. We have journalists and politicians that think that you're dumb, that think that you can't see the underlying message, think that you can't see the implications of these policies and these statements that they put forth, like whiteness is a pandemic. We have a culture where you can say whiteness is a pandemic and have absolutely nothing done to you. Nothing. Most importantly, we have a culture that does not respect personal responsibility, but only respects group responsibility. We have a culture that does not see people as autonomous human beings, but more so sees them as a means to an end, as a group full of mindless robots, from what I can tell, programmed to only think in one way. My advice is the same as always. Become the best person you can be. Encourage others to do the same. Pick up your cross and bear the responsibility that you will likely unfairly be forced to take, because the alternative is giving it to an authoritarian who in return will take your autonomy and your rights. I am the Reasonable Conservative. If you like the video, go ahead and throw down a comment. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit that little bell, share this video with your friends. But most importantly, have a great day.